You're listening to Digging Star Wars, the online journal of the films that inspired George Lucas to create the Star Wars saga. I am really excited about today's episode because I'm about to welcome my first guest. But before we go there, let's set up today's episode. We are, of course, kicking off the prequels with Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Since its release in 1999, I've heard Phantom Menace has borrowed at least one crucial element from the Bruce Lee movie Enter the Dragon, which is, let's face it, the granddaddy of kung fu flicks. So this proved to be a very interesting discussion, and our first guest will start things off by telling us a little bit about the importance of Enter the Dragon. Please welcome Phil Congleton.
Hey everyone. Hey Chris. It's great to be here.
Phil is the co-founder of Myopic Films with Chris Mancini, who has appeared in a number of his own film podcasts. Phil is also the producer of my all-time favorite short film, The Man Who Loved Doughnuts, which is still funny after all these years.
Thanks, Chris.
As a matter of fact, when I first met Phil eons ago...
Just in case you were wondering.
I didn't believe he was the Phil Congleton, the producer of The Man Who Loved Doughnuts, because Phil was so laid back and nonchalant, and the donut film is so intense, funny, simply super cool, and I just love that movie so much. Phil, since then, has pioneered several creative projects, including a collaborative effort between the two of us, a movie club called Dying Breed Movie Club, based on Stephen J. Schneider's book, 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die. And you can learn more about the Dying Breed Movie Club on its Facebook page.
And by the way, Enter the Dragon is in the 1001 movie book also.
So, to make a long story short, Phil knows movies. And without further ado, let's hear about Enter the Dragon.
Enter the Dragon is a Bruce Lee film through and through, but the plot of the film revolves more around the main antagonist of the film, a corrupt Chinese businessman named Han. Hey, Han, that's interesting. Makes you wonder. Han, who owns a private island and sells opium and prostitution as a hobby, sets up martial arts tournaments as a means to recruit new hired help. We find out quickly in the beginning of the film that Han used to be part of the same Shaolin temple that Lee is part of, but Han turned corrupt. We also learn that Han was responsible for the death of Lee's sister. Lee, who is going to the tournament, is asked by a British agency to help expose Han's evil deeds. With that and honor and revenge on mind, everything else flows from there. We have a nice setup with the trip to the island, meeting the new characters, and getting into the tournament, Bruce Lee style.
Wow, yeah, that's perfectly done. What about some film history facts regarding Enter the Dragon?
Even though most people call Game of Death Bruce Lee's last film, he unfortunately died and even missed the release of Enter the Dragon, too. Also of note, in 2004, Enter the Dragon was preserved in the National Film Registry.
Thanks, Phil. Now that we've heard about the dragon, let's see what the Menace borrowed from it. Dragon starts off with a great scene between Lee and one of his students, where Lee asks his student to kick him, and in the process, Lee bats him on the head and berates the student while teaching him. Lee's dialogue and philosophy are similar to Qui-Gon. Lee tells his student, don't think. Feel. Which is very similar to Qui-Gon's instructions to Anakin before the pod race. Feel, don't think. Trust your instincts. Lee also talks about emotional content that is not anger, which I believe is an element Lucas borrowed in regards to the Force.
The comparison between Lee and Qui-Gon's philosophical teachings to their students are fun to explore.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the cool things about Enter the Dragon is the fact that Bruce Lee is speaking English with his own voice. Don't think, feel. Let me backtrack for a few seconds. Lee's first three films were all Chinese films, so Lee's dubbed in the American versions usually pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
At least now you can get the Chinese with English subtitles on DVD, so you can hear Lee's Chinese voice in these films. In Enter the Dragon, it is an American film, and he is speaking English. Quite well, I might add. Definitely better than I am right now. You have to remember, Bruce Lee is as American as he was Chinese. Sure, he held on to his Chinese roots, but Bruce was born in San Francisco, went to high school here in America, and went to Washington State University. His remains are even buried in Seattle. It was always his goal to reach across the Pacific Ocean and combine these two great cultures that made him and produce a Chinese-American production.
Right.
And when he discusses his teachings with his student, hearing him speak his lines in English makes the film feel more real, and you get that Kung Fu Key Luke Grasshopper,
Right.
Mr. Miyagi Karate Kid wax on, wax off thing going really good when you hear Bruce's voice. It's like a finger pointing at the moon. You throw in the comparison with Qui-Gon and you have something there.
And for those who don't know, who is Key Luke?
Key Luke was an Asian American actor whose career went all the way back to the Charlie Chan movies of the 30s and 40s. He played Chan's number one son. Later on, he was David Carradine's teacher on the Kung Fu TV series from the 70s. Oddly enough, Bruce Lee was supposed to be Kane in the TV series, but because of his death, David Carradine was cast in the role. Lee had been working on early ideas for the show at the time of his death. Key Luke also did a lot of audio acting work and was in many of the dubbed English versions of many Toho films of the 50s and 60s. He is the voice of the main character in Rodan.
Rodan? Are you kidding me? That's cool.
Yes. And he got to do Han's voice in Enter the Dragon. It is interesting to note that Keen Shi, I hope I'm saying that right, the actor who plays Han, couldn't speak a lick of English, but he learned how to mouth all the words, and his dialogue was dubbed back in by Key Luke.
That's cool. Okay, back to Star Wars.
Yes.
The biggest borrowed element from Dragon comes late in the film when Lee is fighting in an underground base.
Yes.
In the midst of the battle, Lee enters a section of the base and is sealed off by several doors that slide down into place. Security cameras are on Lee, and you get the sense that he knows this. In spite of this, he sits down and meditates. When the doors open and the attackers come in, Lee instantly springs into action and the battle continues. This is very similar to Qui-Gon's battle with Darth Maul in the Theed Castle on Naboo, when the power generator doors engage, separating the Jedi Knight from the Sith apprentice. In his enclosed space, Qui-Gon takes a knee and meditates, while on the other side of the energy wall, Darth Maul paces back and forth like a caged animal eyeing its prey.
That meditation fight scene comparison is neat too. What gave Enter the Dragon such a strong response from filmgoers and critics back in 1973 was its ability to capture that combination of pure martial arts, and it had that 007 feeling that was all the rage in the 70s. Remember, Bruce is a martial artist who is asked to be a spy, and the scene Chris references in Dragon, in which Han is perched safely up on his evil stoop, looking down at Lee, is seen in all the Bond films. Oddly enough, the same thing happens with Obi-Wan and Darth Maul near the end of Phantom Menace. Maul is safely perched up on the bridge, while Obi-Wan is hanging off of the wall looking up.
That Obi-Wan thing's cool. I didn't notice that. A final element I'd like to point out is that one of the henchmen in Enter the Dragon has a distinctive scar above and below his left eye, similar to the one that Anakin will get between episodes 2 and 3. Now, this scar is a common theme in multiple films, as it was also on a villain in Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress. I don't know why the scar keeps reappearing on bad guys, but Lucas certainly picked up on this symbol and used it in episodes 3 and 6.
That's awesome. I love how Bruce doesn't even let the scarred henchman lay a hand on him when they fight. It is pure domination by Lee.
Well, I mean, it's Bruce Lee's film. He of course, he's going to dominate, which is great, by the way. I just think it's great. Now, normally when we wrap up these podcasts, I like to ask a question of our listeners to respond to on the blog. I was thinking, what could we talk about? What could we discuss? And the thing that crossed my mind is, Enter the Dragon is, I'm not going to argue, it's a great film. It deserves all the praise and recognition it's gotten, more so, even more, I think. But watching it, I felt, it was very interesting how they chose the contestants for, Han's big island battle thing. You got, Lee, who's
Lee.
He's the man. And then you got this
John Saxon, the white guy.
The white guy who's he's the whole, kind of Godfather, mob, in trouble, debt, blah, blah, blah. And then you have the black guy,
Jim Kelly as Williams.
Right, who's harassed by the L.A. cops. So I felt like they were borrowing from different genres of film of the day. They got the mob thing, and then they have the blaxploitation thing. and then you have Lee carving out, and I'm wondering, like, are these stereotypes good or bad? Are they serving a purpose? I think they're broadening the audience. I'd like to think of this in a positive light, but what do you think?
Yeah, the movie represents the Caucasian, the African American, and the Asian. It covers all the bases. I think that was something Lee wanted to do. The characters all seem pretty tough and don't seem to be too weak. But yeah, I can see where some people could take something from this. The great thing about this movie is it's an American martial arts movie, and yet most American martial arts movies suck,
Right.
and this one is like the best ever.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, I agree with you there. Like, I think it's really cool that Lee uses his own voice, in the final mix. But like, come on, man, when that black dude gets like all the girls. And he's like, I'm tired. Like, I can only deal with 4 women or whatever.
No, I totally get it. I think it's just a 70s thing, really.
Yeah. No, I thought it was fun. Well, I mean, I want to push that question out to our listeners. So if you comment on that, because, Enter the Dragon is, I agree, it's an awesome movie, and you're not going to get an argument from me there. And the last thing I want to do is taint this, because I from what I know of Bruce Lee, and I don't know certainly as much as you do, Phil, so like interrupt. I think he was very upset with how Asian Americans were portrayed in films up to his time. And I felt like he was trying to put his mark on the film landscape and redefine that. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think Jackie Chan did the same thing also with his films after that.
So I'm curious for people to post whether they think, it is exploiting the stereotypes. I mean,
well, you have to understand, leading up to this, if you saw an Asian person in an American film, it was usually an American dressed up like an Asian person with the fake makeup and all that. And of course, it always looks stereotypical, especially nowadays.
But I mean, from what I know of Lee, he was trying to fight at least the Asian American stereotypes, correct? Like, he was trying to redefine their appearance in movies.
Yeah, he was trying to combine the two, I think. Because, like we said earlier, he was as much American as he was Chinese.
Right.
And I think he was trying to combine the two. Because there is definitely, I mean, even today, there's definite divisions between Chinese and America and things like that.
Yeah.
I also feel like, even though Bruce Lee wasn't the director of the film, I think he had a lot of control over the film.
Yeah.
And if you watch the movie, though, you don't really see any shots at Caucasians either. You would think they may want to make fun of them, too. And it looks like it was just a straightforward martial arts movie. Had some of that 70s flair.
Yeah, but like, this film is breaking that mold, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm curious to see what people comment. I agree. I mean, that's unfortunately, it's something that's happened in cinema since the get-go.
Yeah.
First it was African Americans, and it just seemed to be one nationality, one ethnic group after another. But I'm curious to, I didn't want to put that stickered label on it, like, oh, they use stereotypes. But I want to throw that out there. I want people to comment on it.
It is interesting food for thought, definitely.
Okay. Well, let's push it out to our listeners. And, I love reading your comments if you've been listening. And if this is your first time listening to one of our podcasts, I encourage you to go to diggingstarwars.blogspot.com, listen in to the entire episode, and post a comment to that question. And with that, Phil, I want to thank you very much for joining us for this episode.
Oh, yeah, sure, Chris. This was great fun. I really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot. I will see you soon, and I'll see everyone else in the movie aisles.
And I want to thank also our listeners. Please check back with us next month at diggingstarwars.blogspot.com, where we'll dig into Attack of the Clones and its ties to Mr. David Lean's desert epic, Lawrence of Arabia.
I say, Lawrence, you are a clown.
Thanks, everybody.
Digging Star Wars is produced by Mitch Media and has no connection to Lucasfilm Limited whatsoever. Copyrights for films, trademark characters, and related materials discussed in Digging Star Wars remain with their respective owners. For a list of references or source material, please send an email to diggingstarwars@gmail.com.